2024 has come to its conclusion, with Arsenal topping the Premier League table for the calendar year, alongside having the most goals scored, the least goals conceded, and with a 3-1 win away to Brentford on New Year's Day. It's also a positive start to 2025, with Arsenal now 12 games unbeaten, and will officially be a point better off than this stage last season with a win away to Brighton on Saturday. So, what's the story? Well, for me, it's nothing really new. Arsenal are one of the best sides around, with one of the very best managers. Are we perfect? No, not quite. Can we demand perfection as fans? Absolutely. But is there some important context we should be drawing on when assessing our season thus far? Yes. And should we still be extremely positive, not just about this season, but the direction and the ceiling that this team has? Yes, and yes again. But this video is not about that. Instead, we're going to look at how we're going to try and build on this positive run of results that we've recently had, and specifically analyse the return to our midfield diamond, something we've seen previously before in smatterings, but not in this adapted and improved format. We're going to talk its template, the individual roles within that, as well as the longer term picture. So with all this to come, we're going to start by looking at the diamond template, and as we've covered, this is what we've primarily set up like. This is the example away at Crystal Palace, with Myles Lewis-Skelly moving in from left back to left centre mid, pushing Havertz into his ghosty shadow striker role, operating in tandem with Jesus, and Timber nudging backwards into a back three. Now, all the particulars and the whys behind this we're going to get onto in just a second, and I'm going to miss out purposefully the 1-0 win at home to Ipswich because of that. Because at Brentford, we saw Calafiori coming in for Myles Lewis-Skelly, Merino was pushed into Havertz's role, floating at the tip of the diamond, and Nwaneri became the Saka deputy on the right. And all these slight tweaks had impacts on our dynamics on the pitch, which we're going to fully unpack now. So we've set the scene, let's explain the why now, starting with Arsenal's left-back role in this diamond. Last video was all about Myles Lewis-Skelly, wasn't it? And towards the end of it, I started to flesh out, didn't I, why I thought he was so well suited to this left-back come left-centre-mid role in the diamond. A role that is offset higher to the traditional role in the pivot that our left-back has had in recent times, requiring this left-back to play a lot more in front of the ball, higher in the pockets, but also have the legs to be a bit more of a progressive force in the carry for us too, often receiving much more isolated, but that can be a blessing and promote those infield carries that we've analysed from Myles Lewis-Skelly in the previous video, how he allows the ball to roll across his body, beta press, then snap back and carry on the inside while shielding the ball. There is a greater freedom to what is a more adventurously positioned inverted left back role, and one that gives us, I think, a fuller sense of Myles' repertoire on the ball in terms of his competency in the pockets, as well as his capacity to be more measured and more rhythmic with his passes and touches when he is playing behind the ball and deeper. It's an all-rounder role that Calafiori provides equal upside in too. As we were comparing at the end of last video, Calafiori gives us some real final third punch as well, simply because he is more able to sustain and carry his physical impact higher up the pitch than Myles Lewis-Skelly. Of course, this is nothing to be surprised about. We're talking about a literal 18-year-old in Lewis-Skelly. And as you know, I also love Riccardo Calafiori and his value, how it carries across the pitch. And in this clip against Brentford on Wednesday, it really cuts out his ability in this left back come left centre mid role in the diamond. As always, we're not always confined to one setup. Here we modulate from a 4-3-3, then into the diamond, and Brentford here are a little bit late to read these movements as Jesus connects us centrally in the centre forward, attracting a collapse and giving space for Gabriel to bump it onto Calafiori, who gives us those legs up the pitch, and also a bit of ambition and bravery on the ball. Again, different players here, but similar sort of effects to Myles Lewis-Skelly. And here, Calafiori also shows that final third impact, giving and going with Gabriel Martinelli, offering us some thrust through the half space, punching us through, gathering it well, and sending in a lovely low ball to Merino, who can't quite sort his feet out. And ultimately, our left back in the diamond has this greater onus on them to be this more punchy force, and between Calafiori, Lewis-Skelly, Rice and Timber. I think around this base in our midfield, and whatever composition it comes about in, we have some real top class carrying force here. There's some real unstoppable power in this position, and I wondered why this has informed some of the positions Rice took up against Ipswich, and by extension Partey playing in the 6 against Brentford, positioning higher inside of blocks, especially at times where we've really squeezed the opposition with our centre-backs, allowing the aforementioned players carry around the block, inside or outside, and be another sort of addition of that central snap I think we've refound in patches, I would say, over the last couple of games. And to finish the left-back discussion, the left-back role, and Calafiori's role in particular, his comfort occupying much higher zones, but also running on the outside, means a slightly tweaked role for whoever occupies the tip of the diamond when Calafiori is playing. They suddenly now, with Calafiori's ability to go on the outside, occupy higher zones, have more of a bigger involvement in our build-up, in our 4-3-3, as well as floating higher and doing that side of the job, of course. I think Calafiori's presence is the only way I could support Declan Rice appearing at the tip of our diamond, like we've seen in recent weeks, because we know his qualities elsewhere, but he struck up a real nice balance with Calafiori when he has played on the left-hand side, enabling him to drop lower and carry us up the pitch, which is always where he's going to be at his progressive best, where he can start lower and help springboard attacks. And talking about springboarding attacks, let's talk about Gabriel Jesus' resurgence in tandem with this return to the diamond. Now, this isn't necessarily a direct correlation, but he is being asked, the role that he's being asked to play has certainly helped showcase a player who is not just returning to goals, but returning to a crispness in his actions. This is what you may have missed with Jesus' return to form, because take away the goals for a second, which have been so helpful, particularly in Bukayo Saka's absence, but instead, look how Jesus has made things stick for us. I put a tweet out about this the other day, but it's about how he's competing now for second balls, for bouncing balls, turning chaotic situations again into moments of creation and greater stability for us. This type of Gabi Jesus is imperative for, first and foremost, retention and security of the ball in central spaces, and giving us that platform to then attack from and through the middle, as examples on the screen are showing you now. Then, on top of that, if you take how all of this translates into Jesus giving us more of those moments of magic in the dribble to evade pressure, to break into spaces, you start getting a lot of the old Jesus back. Now, it's important to say that we will never see his pre-injury issues, pre-knee injury issues, his physical levels back for Arsenal, because those are beyond him, I'm pretty confident of now. But if we can get just 2/3 of those back, that is some serious value still to be had in Gabi Jesus. And I think he's showing, as he's getting more minutes and returning to sharpness, he's showing us at the moment that it was only just a case of him needing minutes. What's equally as valuable, though, are Jesus' movements and rotations to help balance our attack out. Jesus works off Havertz, for example, when he plays at the tip of the diamond extremely well as a pair. There is always an option to occupy the centre-backs, to win second balls, to stretch defences, which is more of a solely Kai Havertz thing now, but also to, I think, give us a real dynamic combination that will cause any side issues, as well as a presence deeper to give us touches. Here are Kai Havertz's touches against Palace. You'll see how spread out they are. Here is Jesus' influence against Brentford, as well as Mikel Merino's. The way our man at the tip of the diamond gives us overloads too, adds another body centrally, as we saw for Martinelli's goal against Brentford. This doesn't actually have to come on the ball, it can come off it too. This is really key. Timber provides his typical thrust from right back, allowing Nwaneri to give us that half space cross we made real good use of against Brentford, and part of the reason we made such good use of it was because how Jesus and Merino occupy the centre-backs here gives us a sort of soft zone or kill zone for Martinelli to creep into, to camp out in, secure the knockdown and fire away the third goal. Let's talk about Jesus floating about too, though, because we've seen him often drift to the right hand side, and overload with Timber here on the overlap, Odegaard moving outside of the block, and Nwaneri balancing out these counter movements by giving Jesus a passing option darting into a pocket. Jesus does not quite get the ball right on this occasion, but that active link up from wide to the centre is another part of Jesus' wide play, I think, when he goes out wide, or even if he just starts there, that is often overlooked. And if getting Nwaneri inside on the right is important, then of course doing that to Martinelli and allowing him to get on the inside is just as important on the left. Here, Jesus does not necessarily do anything major, but it's simply his rotation with Martinelli, with Calafiori punching holes, Timber floating across, this could also be Martin Odegaard of course, is found here, Timber, by Calafiori, and that flick to Martinelli darting through the middle is very, very close to coming off. And I think off the top of my head, the Brentford game was probably the least touch-liney I've seen Martinelli deployed the whole of the season. And look, it's not just Jesus. We've spoken at length about Calafiori helping that, Merino too, and alongside this passage is a great example of that I've just shown, an effort to be much more incisive and chaotic and a bit brave, and I think the diamond, by extension, helps us be a bit more braver and chaotic in and around the box that you see here for Jesus' actual equaliser, with Merino centrally floating into these zone 14 spaces on the edge of the box, winning 2 second balls, setting up the Partey strike, and again, it's anticipation from Jesus, it's that ability to compete and make things stick that is returning to his game. And if we are seeing more of this dynamism, off-ball movement from Jesus, then I think that's a wider correspondence to the general fluidity that we've managed to maintain really well in the diamond, which is probably what differentiates it the most to our previous usages of the midfield diamond in times gone by. There isn't really the same shoehorning into roles, which I think has been done in the past with the diamond in terms of tactical familiarity, which is totally understandable. But as there has been for almost a year now, there is a real comfort in this Arsenal team. Not just switching, as you'll see here, between different variations of the diamond, but against Brentford, different shapes. We'd use the 4-3-3 a lot against Brentford, which focused suddenly on pushing the fullbacks really high and wide, allowing Merino to help out with some deeper touches on occasion, not just Martin Odegaard. But circling back round for a minute, this rotation and these rotations within the diamond shape really caught my eye as a possible template for future deployments of it. The 6 here, Partey, drops into the right centre-back, with Timber tucking into right centre-mid, meaning Odegaard is free to float centrally, with Merino filling in lower. This may seem insignificant, but look at the angles this creates. Odegaard suddenly moving on the blind side, found by Merino, who turns easily and then plays it, Odegaard, onto Jesus. 2 passes, bang bang, through the lines quickly and snappy. And there's probably something to say about Timber in this picture too in the right centre mid. Against Palace, we saw the downsides of Arsenal defending transitions, of course, without Declan Rice, who has been, I think, having his minutes managed after the couple of minor injuries he's picked up recently. But in this frame, it's Odegaard who has dropped centrally, with Timber rotating into that right centre mid. Now, as I've literally just said, having that fluidity to allow Odegaard to continue to float is super important for us. But I also like, and still will always like, when he starts to move, him having support close by, especially if we're away from home. But the Brentford shot of Odegaard higher instead of lower against Palace, where we ultimately turned over the ball and were exposed to a transition, that shot of Odegaard higher where he can float certainly further to the left gives us a platform for a bit more Timber responsibility in the middle as well, which is always going to be a good thing. Against Palace, let's go back to that game now. Timber in high possession was mostly inside Martinelli, and this happened, yes, lots against Brentford, but as soon as that right hand side got revolving, Odegaard got some time outside the block. Again, having Odegaard in that deeper facilitative role is really nice, especially when you're trying to get Nwaneri on the inside, where he can really give us some X factor, which meant Timber had a slightly different role against Brentford. It was more about overlapping and offering a width option for us. He also became a threat on the off-the-shoulder ball, and with the amount of territory that we controlled, at least until we started to manage, I think, the minutes remaining from about minute 70 onwards, Timber had no problem, because of this territorial dominance, stepping through from right centre-back into our 2-3-5 that we formed in settled possession, with Calafiori tucking into the midfield. But I feel like I have almost an obligation to show you this with the amount I love Arsenal's fluid, dynamic fullbacks. Look how we can still shift from side to side with Calafiori in the last line now and Timber sitting slightly deeper in that midfield three. These rotations on our right side were really seamless and clean, which was really good to see. It was great to see Mikel Arteta as well, allowing Nwaneri to affect the game in the centre of the pitch because, of course, Mikel Arteta will know this and know that he's best there. That tactical familiarity that we've just been speaking about has at times, I think, made these global roles and universal ideas that Arteta has, for example, for his right winger, get in the way of using an individual best in them. Like, for example, when we've seen Fabio Vieira used to just hold the width on the right wing without any runners around him. Again, Mikel, of course, knows this, and I think he's at now a real point of trust with the squad as a whole at the moment. And even better, when Nwaneri still has to spend time occupying the touchline and holding width for us. I will repeat myself once again because this is so important when it comes to scouting and understanding Nwaneri as a player. His range of motion is what makes him so special. His shiftiness that we saw against Brentford in the carry, those small choppy steps, the burst he has in the first 5 yards or so, the low centre of gravity mean he disguises his angle of approach when taking on a defender really well. And it also keeps the fullback honest, instantly giving Nwaneri that separation to attack them, to carry towards them, to build momentum and actually sustain himself really well out wide because of this two-way threat. And of course he has creative breaker qualities as well. We know he has not just a nose for goal where we want to get him in and around the box, but he likes to put crosses in the box too. But to finish, what are my overall thoughts on the diamond? I think it has divided people mostly, but ultimately it is just another tool for Arteta, for Arsenal to implement. We can and ah about where players are best utilised, but the bottom line is the diamond is a real tactical weapon for Mikel and something we are not necessarily going to resort to as a default. And I think our big money attacking signing or signings are going to have a big impact as to what is our default setup. For example, there are players out there who make a diamond midfield more consistently, at least, a more realistic option. But all in all, when we're talking about an Arsenal team who want to be known for having many different forms, to be difficult to prepare for, the diamond is simply another addition to that. But thank you so much, guys, for watching. I really hope you enjoyed the video. I'll catch you in the next one. See you later.